Welcome to your deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring this article that you sent us. It's about challenges that Christian marriages face, but through a very specific lens, right? The idea of spiritual warfare.
Yes. And it really dives into this whole idea that marriages, particularly ones that are rooted in Christian faith, are prime targets.
Okay, see, I'm intrigued already. But isn't spiritual warfare, I mean, that's a pretty loaded term. Could you maybe unpack that concept a bit for our listener?
Yeah, it's definitely a pretty powerful concept. The article basically suggests that there's this spiritual dimension to the challenges. Like there are forces at play that are really actively trying to undermine these unions.
So not just your typical relationship problems, but something more, I don't know, targeted.
Exactly. The article makes this really fascinating comparison between marriage and the relationship between Christ and the church,
Mm.
suggesting that like a really strong Christian marriage, one that's thriving, is like a testament to faith.
And that a marriage that's struggling is seen as a weakness, almost like giving the enemy fuel. Look, their faith isn't even strong enough to hold their own marriage together.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's like it's about more than just the couple themselves. It's about the impact their marriage has on their faith community
Right.
and like their ability to really live out their beliefs authentically.
And you'll see that the article goes back to the book of Genesis, specifically Genesis 1:27-28.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of underscore, I guess, why marriage might be such a significant target.
Exactly. This passage talks about God creating humans in his image, male and female. And that's seen as the foundation for marriage. And so if marriage is like integral to God's plan for humanity, well, then messing that up would be a major victory from the enemy's point of view, right?
Wow, so we're talking about like sabotaging the whole project from the very beginning. I mean, that's a pretty intense way to look at it.
It is. It definitely raises the stakes. And then the article goes even further. It actually identifies specific lies that are being, it claims, targeted at women and men in these marriages.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting. So the article claims that these lies play on like our deepest insecurities and anxieties. And for women, some examples are, he deserves better than you, or protect yourself by not giving your whole heart.
And you can see how those thoughts would be just incredibly damaging. They prey on a woman's sense of self-worth. And it could lead to her holding back emotionally and ultimately, creating distance in the relationship.
Yeah, those are brutal. I mean, while these statements can be hurtful, aren't they also kind of just common insecurities many people experience, regardless of their faith?
That's a really great point. It makes you wonder about the connection between these universal anxieties and this whole idea of spiritual attacks. Like, maybe these insecurities just get amplified in this context.
So it's like the enemy is taking advantage of those vulnerabilities that are already there. Okay, what about the lies that are aimed at men?
Well, for men, the article highlights things like she's not attracted to you anymore, or you're going to fail to meet her needs.
So basically attacking like the core of a man's sense of masculinity and his ability to provide and protect.
Exactly. And the article suggests that these types of lies can actually lead men to withdraw from their wives because they feel inadequate and afraid of disappointing their partner.
Okay, so we have this idea that Christian marriages are under attack. And these kind of insidious lies are specifically designed to create doubt and insecurity and ultimately division. It's pretty bleak, but surely the article offers some hope, right? Like some ways to combat these forces.
It does. And one of the most important strategies the article emphasizes is communication.
Yeah, definitely the article says that being open and honest with each other is absolutely essential if you want to dismantle these lies. When you bring those fears and insecurities out into the open, you kind of rob them of their power. Yeah, it's like you said, shining a light on the creepy crawlies hiding under the bed. Right?
Yeah.
Suddenly they're not so scary anymore. But wouldn't that take a lot of vulnerability to really open up like that?
It definitely does, but the article actually argues that being vulnerable is a strength in this context. It allows couples to connect on a much deeper level, to offer support and understanding to each other rather than judgment.
Okay, so instead of letting those lies just kind of fester in the dark, you're saying create this space of trust and empathy where you can face them together. That makes a lot of sense. What about the spiritual side of things, though? How does the article address that?
So prayer is another really important piece of the puzzle. The article encourages couples to pray together, to seek guidance and strength from God.
So it's not just about talking things out, it's about actively bringing your faith into the process.
Exactly. It's about coming together and, aligning yourselves with something bigger than yourselves, to draw on that power, to overcome the challenges you're facing.
Yeah, I can see how that could be empowering, especially when you're dealing with something that feels as overwhelming as spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
It's like having backup in a fight.
Mm-mm.
But what if you're just not someone who prays? Does the article have any other practical advice?
Oh, it does. It also talks about how important it is to find mentors, to seek guidance from other couples who have walked a similar path.
Well, like tapping into the wisdom of people who've been there and done that, that sounds incredibly helpful.
Hmm.
What are some of the specific benefits of having mentors in this kind of situation?
Well, for one thing, mentors can offer a totally fresh perspective on your situation, and they can share strategies that work for them. Maybe even more importantly than that, though, they can remind you that you're not alone in this.
Yeah, like having a guide who's already navigated that same tricky terrain
Yeah.
so they can help you avoid the pitfalls and stay on track.
That's a great way to put it. And they can also help you figure out what's true and what's a lie. When you're stuck in the middle of all those negative thoughts and emotions, it can be really hard to see things clearly.
So the mentors can help you cut through all the noise and get back to what really matters, the core values and beliefs that your marriage is based on.
Exactly. They can provide that anchor that you need when things feel really stormy. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that the article is focusing specifically on Christian marriages, but the challenges it's describing, a lot of couples can relate to that, no matter what their faith is.
That's a really good point. If you think about your own relationships, have you ever felt those same pressures, those doubts? The article is framing these things in a spiritual context, but there might be other ways to understand these universal experiences.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we all deal with challenges in our relationships, right? Communication breakdowns, insecurities, pressure from the outside world. It's just part of being human.
So whether or not you agree with this idea of spiritual warfare, the practical advice in the article, communication and prayer and mentorship, that could apply to any relationship.
Oh, absolutely. Those are all strategies that can help you build stronger connections and, deepen that trust
Yeah.
and help you deal with the ups and downs that come with any close relationship.
And that brings up an interesting thought. While the article is talking about the vulnerabilities that are inherent in marriage, it's also kind of implicitly acknowledging how powerful marriage is, don't you think?
Definitely. Yeah, despite all the challenges, it's clear that the article sees marriage as something worth fighting for,
Hmm.
as a sacred bond that can reflect something much bigger than just the two people involved.
That's what I find so fascinating about this whole discussion. We've been exploring this concept of spiritual warfare
Mm.
and the anxieties it can bring up and how to overcome those challenges. But ultimately, it all comes back to this really basic human need for connection, for love, for a partnership that can help you weather the storms. And that's a really powerful message, whether you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective or a more secular one.
Yeah, it really is. It kind of gets at that deep human need to belong, to have love that lasts, a partnership that can help us make sense of this crazy thing called life.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how this article, while it's focused on this specific religious framework,
Hmm.
it actually kind of opens up this much bigger conversation. It's like we've been given this starting point, a particular way to look at these relationship challenges.
That's a great point. It makes you wonder about other perspectives too, right? Like what would other spiritual traditions or philosophies say about the challenges and the joys of being married?
Exactly. Like this article is offering the Christian point of view, but what would a Buddhist approach say? Or a humanist one?
Hmm.
Or just a psychological perspective? There's so much to think about here.
Absolutely. And that's really what we hope you take away from this episode today. This deep dive isn't meant to be the end-all be-all of the marriage conversation, but more like a jumping off point for you to do your own thinking and exploring.
So as we wrap things up, we want to leave you with this thought. What really stuck with you from our conversation? Do you see these relationship problems through a spiritual lens? Or is there another way of looking at it that resonates more with you?
This episode has given us all a taste of one perspective, but there are tons of others out there. We really encourage you to keep digging into this topic, to have these conversations with the people in your life, and to seek out the wisdom that speaks to your own heart and experiences.
Because at the end of the day, the goal is to create relationships that are stronger and healthier and more fulfilling. And the more viewpoints we're exposed to, the more tools we have to make that happen.
That's a great way to sum it up. So until next time, keep on diving and exploring and having those conversations.
And a big thanks to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.